For all the analysis now and the Morrison government scramble to recalibrate the vaccine rollout and this very stark warning on the stability of Australia's electricity grid, I'm joined from Melbourne by the foreign editor of the Australian newspaper, Greg Sheridan. Greg, great to have you on the show as always. A well-respected Labor pollster, you know him, I know him, John Utting. He says the stuttering vaccine rollout will cost Scott Morrison the next election. The PM was asked this very question today by Karl Stefanovic.
Will it cost you the next election?
That is the last thing on my mind, Carl. I'm just simply doing everything we can to save lives and livelihoods.
What's your assessment, Greg?
Well, Peter, great to be with you. Look, I don't think anyone can predict the next election from here. I would say the polling for 2 years has been within the 52-48 range, and mostly it's been within the 51-49 range. So that suggests to me the next election is going to be close. The campaign is going to matter. The candidates are going to matter. The ground game by each side is going to matter. On COVID, I think the Boris Johnson experience tells us that what you need is a couple of good months. And so Britain had a pretty hopeless response to COVID, pretty chaotic and pretty disastrous. But Johnson now smells like roses because they've had a great vaccine campaign. Now, we've had a slow vaccine campaign. We've had a bit of bad luck choosing the vaccine that ended up not to be the best. But if Morrison is going to an election in March next year and he can say, look, no Australian has died and we're all vaccinated now, that strikes me as that'll be a pretty powerful argument. But between now and next March is like 1,000 lifetimes away. I mean, I wouldn't predict what's going to happen tomorrow in politics, much less at the next election.
Well, that's why you're a senior gallery journalist and you're not Karl Stefanovic on Breakfast TV. I think you're absolutely right. Although the one difference I have to say in the UK, because they haven't got the complication of state governments, that's the wild card for the PM. They are holding him back. They're not helping him with lockdowns other than Gladys Berejiklian. And I think that's part of the problem in the management of the vaccine rollout. But we'll see what happens. I want to ask you about your column today. You've compared Barnaby Joyce to Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, and you've made the broader observation about the fracturing of conservative politics across the West. You write, the intellectual vacuum on the centre right is throwing up leaders whose connection to the electorate is a celebrity quality of personal intensity and entertainment value. I think Barnaby is pretty happy with that sort of comparison if he fits the category.
Well, that's right. I mean, so I like Barnaby, and I think on the whole, it's a net plus to return to him for the coalition. Having said that, I thought Michael McCormack is an extremely decent person and gave a bravura performance on his last day. Not just decent, but technically superb. And he has really helped the National Party to move into this new phase without rancour. But Barnaby leads, has had a bit of a chaotic personal life, and he speaks a little bit all over the shop and so on. And of course, McCormack's long, steady personal life counted for nothing in his favour. People now are voting for Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, not in spite of their chaotic lives, but in part because of them. They identify with the same failures and foibles. Of course, Barnaby remains high risk, but this is a government which is too much dominated by one person, the Prime Minister. It's carried by the Prime Minister and it's dominated by the Prime Minister. There is a tremendous lack of big beasts in this government. Christian Porter was developing into one, but he's been cut down. Peter Dutton certainly is one. Maybe Josh Frydenberg. After that, you've pretty well, they're like the Australian Test lineup. They've had all the way from Stephen Smith to Marnus Labuschagne. So Barnaby is a big beast. He has a profile. The other thing the government lacks is attack dogs. Barnaby can carry an attack to Labor, especially in the regions. Most of the cabinet ministers, they just don't have the profile. They don't have the stomach for that sort of politics anyway, and they can't really do it. They're not incompetent people or anything, but they're just lacking that skill, or maybe. And of course, the old big beasts have all left politics. So I think, in net terms, Barnaby is potentially a big plus for the government. But of course, in any politician as dynamic, to use that word, as Barnaby, there is a risk as well as a reward.
I remember many phone calls in opposition in government early morning when the media broke just to see what he was doing and trying to keep him on the straight and narrow. I mean, he is a very powerful weapon. They're at the back end of a campaign cycle. There'll soon be an election proper. I think you better have him with you than against you. So I think the Prime Minister will harness his good for the government. I want to go to the story out today. Australian energy market operator AEMO has told the renewable energy sector not to cut corners in connecting to the national grid amid predictions coal will disappear by 2040. At the same time, the Australian energy regulator will reportedly crack down on so-called weather-dependent generators, wind farms, solar farms, etc., to stop them reducing their output when supply is needed. Now, Greg, this is a mess strategically. We're in a very dangerous times and we're impoverishing ourselves in terms of energy security and economic security because we're having this forced retirement of coal. Surely we can get this right. This is a real priority.
Well, look, I agree with you completely, Peter. I think this is nuts. I am disappointed that the government has given up the intellectual struggle on coal. Anthony Albanese said in Parliament the other day that all of our major trading partners had committed to net zero by 2050. Albanese is just plain wrong, as he is on so many things. China has a net emissions target of 2060, which may as well be in the 23rd century. Japan, a country that I love and admire, has a notional net zero target by 2050, and it has 20 coal-fired power stations approved. So how is it that Japan can do 20 and theoretically get to net zero? Of course, I don't think anyone's going to get to net zero. I think this is just one of these crazy moments in public life around Western politics, which will disappear in a few years. As soon as they try to make the French voters pay, $500 more for their power bill, or as soon as they try to make British voters get rid of their central heating, this is all going to collapse in a heap. But what are the energy regulators saying to us? That we can't have coal, we can't have fossil fuel, and we can't have renewables, which are unreliable. Where are we supposed to get energy from? Are we all going to be running on our own bicycles, generating our own houses' electricity? China, at the end of the current 5-year plan, with all of its nuclear, all of its hydro, and all of its renewables, will still have 80%, fully 80% of its power generated by fossil fuels. I think this is kind of madness, and the government strategy seems to be, we'll go along with this, but we'll be a bit more sensible than Labor. And therefore, the contest in the end will be full implementation of madness under Labor, only 97% under us, and therefore we'll get a pass mark from the inner cities and we'll keep the regions. That might work. That might work. People have won elections on that basis in the past, but I think it's disappointing and suboptimal and also a bit dangerous.
Well, I can't say it's it's thoroughly disappointing for me. I hope that the party picks itself up and gets back into the fight. Greg Sheridan, thank you as always.
Thanks so much, Peter.